Hello everyone, it's Jin'taan here and welcome to another solo PvP video. I know you guys have gotten a little used to having some fleet content on Wednesday, but unfortunately the past two fleets I've run haven't really produced content that would be good to make videos from. But I will mention them just so that you know that, not every fleet of mine is some amazing success, so that you can have some realistic expectations for where your fleet should be as well. The first of these has a battle report of its own that's been written up by Sullivan Harden of the New Eden Report, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. But the TLDR of my involvement is that I was running another one of my public fleets, and I started a small fight that ended up escalating massively as third parties got involved and started trying to drop dreads to secure the fight for themselves, which led to counter-escalation on Provi's part and ended up with a large amount of dread kills for Provi. It's always fun to spark off these kind of things, but my little force was relatively outnumbered and it wasn't going to have a meaningful impact on the fight at this point, so I just decided to retreat. The fleet I ran on Monday, on the other hand, had the complete opposite problem, as I wasn't really able to draw a fight out of Pandemic Horde, as they'd moved their main base of operations from BWF to SH1, but I'd already staged some ships in the area, so I wanted to try and use them up. Thanks to a good composition with a lot of tackle, like Retributions and Heretics, we were able to catch a lot of things and, make sure that we got a couple of billion-esque of kills out of the deal, but it wasn't relatively interesting. We didn't have to make any particularly hard decisions about what to engage, it was just a matter of what could we find. Anyway, so after some absolutely amazing feedback from the community on my previous video, I decided that the best way to move forwards would be to use one of the electronic warfare frigates in solo PvP and see if I could make that work, instead of resorting to just the faction ones. So after a little bit of tinkering in Python, this is what I came up with, and it is a bit cheesy to be using about 100 million ISK worth of extra stuff to give it more capacitor, but I really do think the ship needs it. And considering you're using literally none of the ship's bonuses, I feel like that's acceptable. So what I was doing during this intro is that I was picking up drones that other people had abandoned after previous fights, as I actually find that's a relatively good way to make money if you're a new player, and I wanted to demonstrate how quickly you could rack up 10 to 20 million ISK. And whilst that's not a lot to a veteran player, or even a player who's been playing for 3 to 4 weeks, when you're in your first couple of weeks of playing, that can be a lot of ISK. And I actually end up picking up about 13 or 14 million ISK worth of T2 drones, which would actually be enough to replace this Maulus fin. Whilst I was picking up the last few Hobgoblins, a Federation Navy Comet entered the complex. However, as I was away from the initial warp-in point, I couldn't initially engage him, and he couldn't initially engage me. I was somewhat concerned that he could have been the rail kite fit, and as a result of that I warped out of the site. After that, however, I returned to the complex so that I could try and go in it and see at what range the Federation Navy Comet had set up. However, mid-warp I noticed that there was a Tristan on D-scan as well, and I saw the opportunity to potentially get a kill on one of the two, or maybe even both. Now I decided to put my drones on the Federation Navy Comet first because it's the most valuable target, and I'm hoping that my DPS will aid the Tristans in being able to kill it. However, I'm more concerned with the Tristan than I actually am the Federation Navy Comet, as I can't turn off the DPS of the Tristan's drones as effectively as I can the Federation Navy Comet. So I try and start burning down his resources by webbing and starting to get in range to nuke him. However, this has the unfortunate effect of causing the Tristan to lose the scram on the Federation Navy Comet, which causes him to warp away, and also causes a lot of salt in local, as you can see. And here you can see the real reason why I didn't, in my intro like I did with the Griffin Navy issue, call the Maulus a worse Tristan, because it actually has some interesting differences, namely the fact that the 4 mids allows you to run a double web setup, so you have complete range control, and that let me kind of hold the Tristan at 7,500 meters, which meant that his newts weren't that effective, and I was still able to put a little bit of cap pressure on him from my own newts, as I had better range than him due to the fact that he has to use compact newts and I can use T2 and scoped. In addition, it didn't seem like he'd compensated for this himself, so he was spending a lot of capacitor to do very little damage back to me in return, which led to him missing a couple of rep cycles and eventually dying, which is a mistake that I pretty much needed to win this fight, to be fair. So after that fight I did the usual steps of docking up and repairing myself, and then I went back and decided to go and just loot the battlefield as well, so that I could add to my pile of drones that I'd collected, because I was kind of finding it amusing at this point. And just as I'd finished up again, I saw a Tristan appear on D-scan, so I decided to warp off and drop my drones off again so that I could keep them safe and then just go for another round of fighting. I also saw a Retribution on scan, but I didn't think too much of it at the time. But when I went to actually check the gate, I realised that the Tristan wasn't actually inside the Plex, he was engaged by the Retribution outside of it. Unfortunately, I'd warped in at 100 because I was trying to just use the 1AU D-scan in order to tell what was inside the Plex and see if he had another Tristan with him like he'd done previously, which meant that it was faster for me to warp off and then warp back rather than try and burn that entire 100 kilometers with a 1MN Afterburner. By the time I'm able to get back, however, the Tristan itself is already dead, and the Retribution is 50 kilometers away and able to burn in towards me. However, I do decide to take this fight because I figure, hey, I'm in a 10 million ISK ship and I've already gotten a couple of kills, I might as well just take this fight and see what happens. My hope is that I can use my newts and my webs to just get range control on him and turn off his guns, because a Retribution shouldn't have any room for an injector, and as such I should be able to completely newt him dry, although it's likely it would still take me a while to break his tank at that point. And whilst I am, by setting an intercept path, able to actually land a web and scram on him and start to get newts down, I don't really pull into a tight orbit like I probably should have done, and as a result he's still able to hit me. I probably should have orbited him at 500 and just prayed to God that I could get under his beams, but I wasn't able to think of it quick enough and I was pretty easily deleted. Still, I was having a ton of fun with the fit and I didn't want to call it quits there, so I went back to Amar and bought another Maulus in order to go out and roam again. This time heading to the Amar Minmatar warzone rather than the Caldari Galante warzone, as that started to have a bunch of small frigate gangs roaming around, which I couldn't really engage with a Maulus. And after a little bit of searching, I was able to finally find a target, which was a Tormentor, and this was going to be a really interesting fight. As whilst I would be able to eventually turn off the Tormentor's DPS, it was going to be an incredibly difficult race to get there before the Tormentor was able to kill me, as it's one of the best scram kiters in the game and it has so much DPS that it can race a lot of other ships. As you can see, the Tormentor is able to pretty quickly just eat through me. It takes away my shields and armor very quickly and gets right to the meat of chewing through that hull tank. During this time, however, I'm trying to keep him in the optimal range of my newts, and I'm not doing perfectly at that, but I'm doing well enough. And one heated cycle later, you can see that he stops being able to fire, and that slows his DPS down to a crawl, as he only has 2 drones left to attack me with at this point. And because of that, I'm able to pull ahead in the race, and this is especially true because the Tormentor uses an Ansilt rep as part of its tank. So by trading my capacitor for his capacitor, I'm not losing that much, and he's losing almost all of his DPS and a significant portion of his tank in return. After securing the kill, however, I have to go and do all the same things that I normally have to do. I have to go off and find a friendly citadel to repair in, and then just go back out and try and find some more fights. However, this time it's a lot faster than normal, as I just sit in this Plex for a little bit of time, and then I start to see a Condor on D-scan. So I decide to go and check the small outpost, as I assume that that's where he's going to be if he's not in the Novice, which is where I am. The fact that he didn't come into me indicates to me that he is probably a defense-orientated fit, which means that he's probably intending to kite a lot. But the Maulus actually has a relatively high base speed, so I decide to go in anyway and see if I can't surprise him with it and catch him out. After a little bit of time with him spent at range, however, he starts to burn into me, and seeing this, I heat my Afterburner and start to burn back in towards him as well, expecting him to turn away eventually, as I again expect him to be kite fit. However, I'm waiting to see the angle at which he pulls away from me, as he could duke to either side, and I want to make sure that I'm able to put myself on an interceptor path to wherever he's aiming towards. My assumption of him being a kite fit, however, turns out to be completely wrong, as he lands a scram and web on me, and I realise that he's probably a rocket kite fit. So at this point I have no idea how this fight's going to play out. And unfortunately I get a little bit distracted and I'm not able to manage my heat properly, and that leads to my scram and one of my webs burning out. As such, I end up trying the last minute desperation attempt of tackle, which is just ramming him with the hope that my bump will send him out of alignment and stop him from warping to whatever he's going to warp to. However, it's not enough, and the Condor's able to disengage, and quite rightfully so, as I was probably going to win the fight. After this mistake, I had to go and rectify it, obviously, which means another trip to a citadel and another repairing and re-onlining of modules. But I wouldn't be bemoaning my lost chance for very much longer, as I warped right back to the novice that I just left and found that there was another fight in progress, with an Incursus going up against a Tormentor. By the time I actually managed to get inside the complex, however, the Incursus had already won the fight, so I moved in and tried to get on top of him and tackle him down as well. However, he was able to actually get on top of me and start applying his void DPS to me almost immediately, and you can see just how much damage this was able to do. But thankfully, with my double webs and my newts, I was able to hold him off at range and force him to reload to null, which caused a break in his DPS for a small period of time, and would give more time for my newts to take effect and potentially turn them off permanently. At this point, I also moved to take care of the Incursus's drone, as I was worried that it would provide him with the sustained damage that would let him win in the long term, as sometimes Incursuses can be fit with injectors that let them have an incredible amount of sustain. And meanwhile, another ship had actually engaged in the fight with a Condor turning up. And this was pretty worrying, because the Condor could have shot me and I had pretty much no health left, so he would have been able to get the kill relatively easily. However, without communicating, he somehow decided to take my side and started shooting the Incursus with me. With both of our meager DPS combined, we were actually able to take out the Incursus. But with that, the temporary truce has ended and the Condor immediately turns on me. And whilst I attempt to get out, aligning to the sun and trying to just AB away from him, I don't have him locked and I'm not able to land my webs on him and push him off, and he's able to finish me off. Just in time for me to see a worm land, who's probably going to kill the Condor as well. That fight would end up being my last one of the night, as by the time I got back to Amar it was pretty late in my local time zone, so I decided to go to sleep instead of continuing. But still, it was actually a really fun ship to fly, and I actually have to recommend that you go out and try it. It's not very good, I will warn you, but it is really entertaining to use something that has that much control, but has to rely almost entirely on its control in order to win fights. And it's a hell of a lot more fun to fight against than the kitey damp fit that I've seen a couple of other people use, which involves using an MWD and a damp to just stay out of the locking range of your opponents. This also plays into a long-term goal of mine, which is to have a solo kill with every single frigate in the game. So I'm sure if you wait around long enough you'll see another one of these kind of meme frigate videos, because it is something that I just genuinely find quite entertaining to try and make work, even though it really shouldn't. Still, it's been a blast everyone, and don't be afraid to check the links in the description, as I do have a Discord for people who are fans of the show if you want to come on and give me some feedback and tell me what you think I could do better in these videos. But until next time, fly smart and take care.